I'm Debra Lockwood Milikin. I am Jane Sandford-Lockwood's granddaughter, and I have with me today my father, Brian Lockwood, my aunt, Pamela Lockwood Bassett, and my uncle, Rodney Pratt Lockwood. And we're here to talk about our memories of the fair, but also the tying in of both the Sandford family and the Lockwood family, who were both founding partners of the fair. Yeah, why don't you each introduce yourself?
I'm Rodney.
I'm Pam.
And I'm Brian.
I think our earliest memories for Brian and I of the fair was probably 1951. And that's the first time that Brian and I rode our ponies in the Sussex County Farm and Horse Show. The memory was it was a rainy day. Grandpa Sanford had given Brian and I cowboy boots and a nice hat. Hopalong Cassidy was the premier person at the time, so we looked the part without the six gun. It was a rainy day, and I do remember that neither one of us came in first, second, or third, but we had a good time doing it. And I think after that, and you remember now, today probably people wouldn't do it, but Brian was 7 and I was 5 on a pony in the horse show. So I'm not sure my mother thought that was the best idea, but Grandpa thought it was wonderful. We go forward a little bit. For those of us who were around at the time, I believe it was 1955, the flood, and it went through the Branchville Dam that ran the power plant, which had long been forgotten, broke in the middle of the night, came through Branchville, wiped out the railroad. It was during a hurricane, and we had an insured called Green Tent Company who did all the tents at the time for the fair, and Bob Dugan prided himself that they had never had a tent blow down, except this time there was no canvas left. So it was very unique. I remember Dad took us up to see, and you'd go by and the bathroom tents had the toilets with no canvas around them. Just everything had blown away. So it was unique that time. I believe it was also the same year, Brian, that Jake taking us to Ideal Farms. We had a drought, and he brought up his tank trucks for water because Branchville had told the fair that they were running low on water, and the fair had better find a water source. So those two things early on, I think. The other thing that amazed me is back then it was more of a farm show than the horse show. And we had Dick Roy from the Roy Company, Dick and Buzz Roy. You had Judd Coates, who sold Oliver tractors in Newton. We had Lawrence Yetter up in Augusta with Farmall. We had John Deere, and we had Fords. The nice thing of being a member of the Sandford family, Brian and I were able to crawl all over them, where they kept telling other kids to get off, you know.
We could go sit on them.
We could go sit on them, you know, and we thought we were pretty special. And I thought that was really unique. One of the ones that was there was Levitt Griggs. Levitt lived in Newton, but had been the head salesman for De La Valle milking machines, and he was well known throughout both Sussex, Orange County, and Warren County. And De La Valle had the special deal, and he showed the farmers how to work, that if their power went out, they could take one of the farm trucks and use the vacuum off of the manifold and run the milking machines. Not that the people wanted to, they could have gone back and hand milked, but that was really unique and on that.
Do you remember anything, you know, those are a lot of really good memories, but do you remember any stories or anything related to the farm when WH and Cliff started the farm and how they kind of came up with this whole concept of the horse show?
Well, I think our mother in the last one sort of said that it really started, the fair started with the Branchville Riding Club.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Branchville Riding Club was really the predecessor to the Sussex County Farm and Horse Show. D.L.B. Smith offered his barn, which later became Tom Higby's house, the red house next to the school, and is now still painted red. But they would keep their horses there. Even Sparky Couse, who just lived over in across, came and would leave his horse there, and his father would take him back. So it was a predecessor. All the farmers were there. When Grandpa won the team pulling contest, it was local farmers. It wasn't the professionals or the ones that did it all the time. These were horses that were out in the field.
They were working.
They were working.
Do you remember what year that was that he won it?
Now you're
I
struggling.
know.
I'm saying like 1938, 1939.
I was gonna say it was-
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I was there the day that his record was beaten. It was a rainy day, and which was really surprising, I thought Grandpa would be upset. He and Les Sweely used to go out under the oak tree and watch every year, and he came up to me and I said, "Grandpa, aren't you upset?" He said, "No, all records are meant to be broken." And I thought that was a very profound statement. The other thing is that Don Bain, you could tell when Don Bain was running for surrogate because free tickets to the fair were quite prevalent. One of the things that Grandpa never let us do was come to the fair free. He always paid. Now he could have gotten, along with, especially back at the old fairgrounds, he could have gotten free tickets. They were readily available. He always saw to it that he paid and that the whole family. He was never he felt the fair was that important to the community and to the Fair Association itself.
And I don't know, Dad, if you want to, or Brian, if you want to go off of the pictures of the farm that Lois provided to us. I believe there are some things there with the actual Sandford Farm location itself that we were talking about that might help spark some thoughts too. You were saying about the original barn used to go all the way out to the road.
Yeah.
I could have given you some of those too. We had a lot of firewood.
What was it? The milking barn, right? Used to go all the way out to the road.
The main barn, but then they referred to this, the other barn in the rear was the sales barn. And then you had a front barn, which was the horse barn, and also was a garage. And then over on the right-hand side, as you're looking at it, was the ice house. And that was back when ice was the cooling agent for everything. And they would store ice in that.
What's amazing is they came up from the Oranges in 1919 because great-grandpa, W.H., had congestion and physical, problems. And so at that time, it was go to the country. If you came to the country, it was fine. They came up, and the first thing they encountered was a milk strike. So instead of cows, they started with 2,000 chickens. And although men didn't do chickens, my grandmother and great-grandmother, that was their job.
Nan's chickens.
With the chickens.
Yeah.
They had a chicken coop, but the one barn that they called the sales barn, they turned into a chicken barn.
Chicken barn.
Oh, wow.
On it.
So now, when you refer to Nan and Grandma, that would be Nan would have been...
These were the Sandford size, and
Yep.
Nan would have been C.W. Clifford's mother, and they came up, and can you imagine, my grandmother just had gotten married to Clifford, and they had a house in Newark with running water, indoor plumbing, electricity, and they came out here, no heat, no electric, no indoor plumbing, and
Privy.
privy, and the electric came like in 1922, 23, and they were looking for some land. Grandpa gave them like a quarter of an acre right next to the Lehigh and Hudson Railroad, free. Can you imagine giving free? Because the electricity was so important to
That's
have.
why that power thing was.
That's why the power thing was. They just gave it to him. While we're talking, different people that were really important to the fair. Brian and I both belong to Branchville Rotary, and I thought the other day I looked over the list. Tom Bain and Don Bain, who's association with the fair, members of the Branchville Rotary. Dr. John Tanis, Dr. Bob Rost. And talking about Bob Rost, he was one of the main reasons the Branchville Fair got put on the books. Sussex County Farm and Horse Show was a must-do in the circuit, and it was because of his knowledge and ability. It was known across the country for doing jumps, and because of that, we got all the heavy hitters, as you might say. That and Frank Chapeau from Walpack, who brought tremendous prestige to the fair. So we had Bob Ross, Shorty Venata belonged to the Branchville Rotary, Howard Wirtz, Dr. Wirtz, Ray Fountain, of course Brian and I, Bob Emmons, who's Ralph Emmons and Bob Emmons did all the electric work at the old fairgrounds. Wow. Sterling Electric did up here, but at the old fairgrounds it was household engineering. Dick Roy, Roy Company, Dick and Buzz Roy, Alice Chalmers, New Holland Equipment, and Sparky Couse, Charlie McEwen, Yo Cunico, and to not leave Newton Rotary out, Warren Welsh did belong to Newton Rotary, so we'll, hit all of the guys. But it's amazing how all these people, that 80% of the ones I mentioned, all lived within the nucleus of Branchville or within 2 or 3 miles. It was that important to the community and to them to give out to it. But Pam got involved with
I did.
With Grandpa, especially later on when the fair started its costume classes and things. So Grandpa Sandford, and when I mention Grandpa, I'm normally talking about my mother's dad, not my great-grandfather, and they got involved with the costume classes.
Yeah.
And they would spend hours figuring out what to do.
It was a lot of fun. Grandpa was, when I came along, he was really into fun. and he, when I was 11 years old, I went and had horseback riding lessons from Marie Yates?
Marie Yaten.
Yep, Yaten. And
whose husband was a vet.
So I got into horses. It was very normal to get into horses with our family. And I eventually thought it would be a lot of fun to get into some sort of fun show activity or whatever. And there was just the Branchville Horse Show was right there. And so the first one we did, I think was in... Was it 74?
64?
64? 64, definitely 64.
64, there's a ribbon
Yes,
over there.
but
That's a
74 wouldn't have been right at all.
Yeah.
So 64. And it was Grandpa and I, the farmer and his daughter going to market. So Grandpa somehow got a duck with little ducklings, and we put that in a cage. And we had a team of ponies that with the farmer who rented the farm. They were
Lou Lance's
ponies, his team. We had a milk can on the back, and we went in and we won a first ribbon, a first prize, which I have a color that all of those ribbons are purple now, but they were once blue. So that was pretty exciting. And then we just kept going year and year after that with some different ideas. And one was a Sunday school picnic that we were going on. Rod was the driver that year because I had been driving the team of horses for that in a practice ahead of time. And Grandpa was doing something on the back of the wagon, and he fell off and hurt his arm.
And that's why he has a sling.
That's why he has a sling, and that's why
I always wondered that.
Yep, and Grandpa couldn't drive that year because you need 2 hands to drive a team of horses. So Rod drove that year. And then we had one where we were pulling out the Model T with a team of horses.
right.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun. And Get Me to the Church on Time was another one.
Who came up with that idea? The church, get me to the church on time. That
That
was
probably came from the musical of, what was that? My Fair Lady musical. I mean, our era were definitely musicals.
Yeah.
I'm sure it came from somewhere like that.
And who was all 3 of you were involved in that one? Am I correct?
Yes,
Take me to
yes.
the church on time.
Yeah, and then we had 4 Generations.
Yeah, the 4
Yeah,
generations.
with were you driving
That's
on that
when
one
Rod.
too?
You can
I
talk
was.
about
Yeah,
that one.
yeah.
I think you might have that
Yeah.
picture in your lap.
Yep. So
When all else failed, they had me do it.
right.
And the 4 generations one. Who was in the 4 generations?
That was Mark, and then you.
Rod's
Mark
son.
was my son.
Right, Mark.
He was like 2 there, and they.
Yeah, and then Grandma, our mom,
Yeah.
and then Grandpa Cliff. So yeah.
And who
Yeah.
came up with that idea of the 4 generations? Was it just
Well,
one
we
of
had a
those
4th
things?
generation. You had to do
did.
something with them.
Because
Yeah,
you could do it.
exactly.
I think what's amazing was, and we call it the Branchville Show, but the Sussex County Farm and Horse Show, which later became the New Jersey State Fair, it's just a progression of development. And one of the things to show the value of the fair to the area and to the state of New Jersey, Brian and I, with Clint Snook from Mill Garage, the Jeep Garage in Newton, in 1965, went to the Waldorf Astoria with him because there was a car show. And the Jeep, the CJ5 Jeep, had come out with a V6 engine. It was the first, and it was wonderful. The cat, it came from a little 4-cylinder to a V6. Oh my goodness. Nobody could get one. There was one sitting there in the Waldorf Astoria. The value of the Sussex County Farm and Horse Show was that Clint Snook got this vehicle. And that's, I mean, amazing. Now there were 3 of us there. We had to get the cars back. Brian got to drive the first leg with this new V6 that could go from 0 to 60 in probably 7 seconds. You could lay rubber, and it was wonderful. And then but no top.
No, but they knew Brian would drive it correctly.
I guess they did. They figured I'd get a ticket before I got out of the city.
That's right, they knew.
But he had to drive it out of the city. They gave, because it was sitting in a hotel in New York, that had to be drained of gas completely. And then they gave you a gallon or so to leave. Brian drives it through the Lincoln Tunnel without a top on.
Oh, fumes.
I'm there. He picked up a Jeep pickup, and I got about a quarter, maybe 2 blocks from the Waldorf and ran out of gas. Meanwhile, Brian and Clint Snook are in New Jersey, but we made it back. He brought it immediately to the fair, and it was, so that was interesting. And then, I don't know why dates would stick in my mind, but I believe it was 1971 or 72 that Jules Marin came to us and asked Brian and I if we would escort the girls at the fair.
Queen of the fair.
And this was the Queen of the Fair. That time they were still doing it in convertibles. So like J.R. Roof, which is now McGuire, and Condits and some of the others all let their new convertibles come to the Queen of the Fair. Now the Queen of the Fair was Wednesday night.
That's right.
And I don't know, Deb, is it still Wednesday night?
No, it's Saturday, right? It's the first,
first
Saturday.
Well, the reason it was Wednesday was that was the start of the fair. Originally the fair was just Saturday, then it went Friday, Saturday, but then for the longest time it was Wednesday through Saturday. So the Queen of the Fair was Wednesday night. Highest attendance of the fair. You'd think even when the fair went from Monday through Saturday, and the reason it was Monday through Saturday was D.L.B. Smith felt in his Christian beliefs that there should not be a fair on a Sunday. He also didn't think there should be drinking on his fairgrounds. Now, some of us didn't always follow the rules, but that was the rule of him. So Jules came up to Brian and I, and he started out saying, you know, getting older, could you guys help escort? And we said, sure, we'll help escort. That's not a bad deal. 2 years into it, he said, you know, I can't MC anymore. Would you do it? So Brian looked at me, I looked at him, we flipped a coin, and he said, I had the bigger mouth, I could be the MC. So
you did the MC, and
did.
then my dad was the
escort. So that year, we still were using cars. The following year, John Faircloud donated his carriages. And so we transitioned. But that year, I got up, and I don't know how many people have stood in the middle of the fairgrounds with 4 or 5 deep around the ring, and I'm looking out and I'm saying, wow, I'm going to wet my pants. So I started out, and the first thing when you talk in the middle of the ring is you're finished talking and you can still hear yourself echo. And I said, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through this? Well, I did pretty good until we got to Miss Lafayette. And Miss Lafayette, I am sorry, I don't remember her name, but it was Lynn Campbell's daughter. Very attractive girl. She had red, I'm starting to write up. Red hair and green eyes. And I got up in front of 10,000 people and said she had red eyes and green hair. Whoa. If you don't think that was an embarrassment. And I didn't realize it till after the fact, and people are laughing at me, and I said, oh my goodness.
Did she win the fair that year, or no?
No.
The Queen of the Fair?
I think that was Dottie Danzer's daughter that won that year. But, you talk of stage fright. And we went on and did that. We transitioned from the Branchville Fairgrounds, and we came up here in '76. Do you remember, Brian? I don't think it was they kept us in the tent. Yeah. We did the arts tent, I believe.
Yes.
On it, they felt the main ring was too big of a venue to use. And I believe we did that. We worked that until like 1982 when Priscilla Statford took over with the arts. And they thought that it was time to get 2 men out of it and let a woman handle it, which was probably the best thing for us on that.
Yeah, it worked out.
It did. We had a few times in the rain with thunder and lightning and all, but basically it was a real county event and the county people. And I think the fair had to transition. It had no choice to move if it was going to grow and stay in existence. And you had those that thought it was the absolute wrong move, and it was not. It was stressful. You know, we all like to live in the past, but it had to grow, and it needed some forward thinking, willing to do that. And they moved up here, and the Walpack Inn was still. They came up and they were doing their roast beef and things.
Roast beef, the sandwich.
And
that's right.
They pulled out, and Brian and Yo Cunico decided that Branchville Rotary should sell roast beef sandwiches. And
so that Yo was the one that put together as far as doing the cooking of the roast beef and the whole business. And we basically sat down with the club and said this would be a fundraiser that we could do. And where the Walpack Inn wasn't going to be doing it that particular year, and they said we could take over their position. And we did, and did very well with it. And I will give you a lot of credit as far as doing things. And over the following year, we still had the tent, and then the year after is when we worked it out with the Fair Association and so on to build the existing building that's there.
We were lucky because we had Tom Bain in the Rotary Club, which his association with the fair made the first permanent building on the fairgrounds to go smoothly on it.
That's where a lot of my memories are, at the roast beef stand, working it.
Oh, yeah.
Watching Uncle Sparky come in with the iced tea.
Oh, yeah, the iced tea. And,
I think that we saw, probably our generation saw the most changes. We saw the change from farming community.
That's right.
When we grew up, Sussex County loved to say it had more cows than people. That changed rather rapidly, certainly in the 60s. But people like to still think that way, that it was. The fair lived through the World War II. You had D.L.B. Smith's grandson, Plumer. Was his first name Christopher? I don't know. I'm sorry on that. My mom's brother, Bill Sandford, both died in the war. And I think that dampened a lot of their enthusiasm. It took a while to get back. One of the things I remember, this goes back early on in the late 40s, early 50s, Grandpop's box was right next to the inn gate. And it was great because we would sit there as kids and look over and see who was riding, who wasn't. And I thought it was great. And not that I threw anything at them, but our great-grandfather passed away, I believe, 53. And it upset everyone. And so he gave up the box that year, thinking no problem to get it the next year. Well, in the old fairgrounds, there was always a waiting list. So he did get one, but we moved halfway down.
Center line.
Yeah.
Center line. We had the center line. I think it was a better box.
It was a
personally.
better box.
Yeah.
You could see much better.
Yeah, on that. But on those, but I think that's really amazing because these people had donated, and remember, this is all donated time and effort. Like I said, Jake Tanis bringing his tank trucks up with water, putting a drinking fountain on the back, and they would do a run in the morning, a milk run, picking up in the tank truck and then cleaning it out and bringing it up to the fairgrounds so that they would have the water up there. And so I think that the fair brought a lot of happy memories. It had some sad times, but overall it was a bonding of the community.
Yeah.
I really think that the bonding, I mean, you had Sparky Couse and Ray Fountain constantly in a battle over who had the best flowers. And whether it was their gladiolus or
that's right.
iris.
Anna Tanis got in that too.
Oh,
we would go and look and see if Anna won.
Now, Sparky and Ray Fountain, that was a nephew and uncle.
Yeah. And who did the best?
Who did the best? And it was always Uncle Sparky tended to come out on top, but there was a constant battle on that. One of the interesting things, after Grandpa Clifford passed away, my mother donated the cow that was on the barn on Route 15 to the fair, and donated the stalls. And now, what people don't realize is the stalls came. Grandpa he had torn all the stalls out of the horse barn right after they went to tractors. And just a side note on tractors, they went to tractors on the farm 1941.
Yeah.
He was one of the first in the county to go with a tractor. Most didn't go until about 1950. Can you imagine? Today we think that's common, but they went 1941. He said it was the worst mistake ever. I said, why is that, Grandpa? He said, because by February of 1942, they had gas rationing. He said, if I kept the horses, things would have been absolutely fine. And I said, oh my goodness. But
because of the war.
the war and the gas rate on it.
So hitting on 1941, so let's go back to your mom and your dad. They met somewhere in 40, 41?
Well, they knew
correct?
each other from school.
Right.
Yeah.
They were
They,
together in school. And Dad, I think, used to tease Mom in school with her braids and, and stuff. And
Well, Mom went to the Little Houses Corner one-room schoolhouse,
right.
which Sparta shut down when she was in 6th grade.
Yeah.
And
yes, because 8th grade was all dressed up
so
for that. Yeah.
they all went
And
to
Newton.
then to the Sparta, the grade school.
They
grade
went to
school.
grade school there.
And,
but then she took
Then they
Well,
went
yeah,
to
but
high
that-
school.
But
that was high school.
her brother, Bill, was the one that was friendly with my dad. And he had warned, my mother's brother, Bill, had warned my mother not to marry the guy. It wasn't going to be a good match. They did last 71 years, but, he warned her. And so my father was extremely friendly with Bill.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't till high school that they got. Now, the kids that lived in the Sparta area, like Mohawk area, took a bus in. My mother would take the train from, not Woodruff's Calf, just down where the Sparta Trades and there used to be an Ideal Creamery. There it would stop. The train, it was the Lackawanna Railroad, would take her into Newton. And
And that's how she would get to school every day in Newton?
She'd take the train.
And that was
train
the
back home.
Halstead, now it's Halstead Middle School for the Newton Public School System.
And one of the
that's right.
ways Mom would make money is being in the cattle dealer business and the horse business in the 30s, she would sell, for 50 cents a day, you could have a pony or a horse.
Right.
And she made her money that way. The other thing that they did, and the TB epidemic came through Sussex County and the cows in the 30s. And so Grandpa and Great-Grandpa decided, we can make more money selling cows than milking. So they started, and in their heyday, they were doing a carload of cows a week.
Yeah.
Great-Grandpa would
A
go
truck or a train
train
car?
Train car.
Boxcar.
boxcar.
Boxcar. And
But back then, horses were more expensive to ship than cows. So they were clever. If they were shipping horses, they would pull the train car on the siding, and they would take the horses off on one side and the cows off on the other, so the station master wouldn't know what was going on.
They were very clever.
Clever. Not always honest, but clever. One other thing he did, this is in the 30s when everybody was going bankrupt, Great-Grandpa bought a circus. Now, he didn't buy the lions and the tigers, but he bought all the horses and ponies.
They knew some good tricks.
But he didn't know, and so my grandfather said, what am I going to do with them? He said, you're not going to eat them, you're going to sell them. Okay. So he brought one. One was a trick pony. So Grandpa got on and immediately threw him off. But his son, young Bill, was able to ride it because it was designated for weight. So they decided the way you're going to sell horses, start another riding club. So Lake Mohawk was new, started in 1926. They went down and started the Lake Mohawk Riding Club. Well, they sold all the horses to them, the ponies and horses. But if you were a summer resident in Lake Mohawk, what'd you do with a horse in the winter? So he would buy them back. But certainly not at the price that he'd sold them for. He probably bought them back at 25 cents on the dollar, and they would come back up the following spring, and he'd sell them all over again to them. It was just a wonderful business on it.
And wasn't somehow with those circus horses eventually, didn't that somehow start the whole concept up here for
the
the
fair,
horse
yeah.
show
Yeah.
with the fair?
because there were a lot of people that had horses that as children.
but they weren't a part of Lake Mohawk, right?
No.
Because that was.
And this was basically the county that.
Well, you have to
they were
remember that all the
participating.
old line people, the Sparky Cows, the Dalrymples,
Yeah.
Baines, everybody got involved in the riding. And what better way to show off your skills than to do a fair on it?
That's neat. When the farm was at its heyday, Sandford Farms, how many cows were under the concept
they
of
had
the farm?
at the height of their business, they had 22 farms, a little over 100 employees, 600 milking cows. Now, 600 in today's standards is just a medium-sized farm. Back then, it was tremendous. And remember that each farm basically would be having its own team of horses. So Grandpa would tend to keep the best for the home farm, but they would do, out there. But having all these men, and women had to work just as hard in the Sandford family as the men. As soon as my mother got her license and got a farm license at 16, it was her job on payday to pay everybody. Now back then you paid in cash. Part of the reason for paying in cash was the federal government under Roosevelt had instituted a policy that if you didn't pay in cash, if you gave them a check, you had to give them time off during the working day to cash it.
the check. Yeah.
So to avoid giving time off, you paid in cash. But now they had farms from Frankfort Township all the way down to Alamucci. They were all over the place. So somebody had to get the payroll, and that was Mom's job to make sure they got that.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the milking of the 600 cows, remember it's all by hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So that makes a big difference. That's why you needed 100 employees.
And at one time, the Grandpa buying a farm here and there, they would get some additional equipment. He got 200 pigs at one time. That was down in Benchester.
You got a good deal.
Good deal. He also got the employee that, different employees. But it was, and initially you had to, he would bring the cows in until they were all tested. It would be Class B milk, so they would take them down to Andover because they would turn it into cheese. Yeah. You couldn't sell it for a Class A milk. But I think every year it would come up, the Branchville Farm and Horse Show, the Sussex County Farm and Horse Show, and the New Jersey State Fair. As one of the local residents in Branchville, Sam Silverman, used to say, it was Holy Week. And it truly was. It became a Holy Week for Sussex County. And I'm just glad that today Sussex County is able to share that with the rest of the state of New Jersey and parts of New York. It's a wonderful way to expand and show what Sussex County has to offer the area.
It does. I think it's interesting though to hear the three of you and your concept on, you remember it at the old location as more of a horse show, but then you've also seen it transition, as you said, Uncle Rod, that it transitioned into what it is today. And it's funny, but I look at my memories, and like I said, one of my fondest memories is working at the roast beef stand all the time, watching Dad, you in the back, cutting up the meat and stuff and, helping with the milk. But I remember Grandpa Cliff was still alive during some of that time, and we had the box in the show ring. And I always remember when the Clydesdales would come here, that was like a big, we would all go to the box to see that.
It needed to expand. It needed to have its demolition derbies, mud bogging, and tractor pulls. You couldn't stay as a dinosaur. I mean, I would probably quit if you changed the drinking fountain, but you had to change, you had to expand. Part of the reason for expanding, Selected Risk needed the where we had the ring. That's now their leach field for the. I mean, things have
Well, I
to
think
change.
they're now on. I think they have sewer now.
Oh, do they?
If I'm not mistaken, I think. But
I mean, it had to expand. Don't get me wrong. The people of Branchville were upset because most of the time during that week they were able to charge enough for parking that they would pay their taxes. I mean this, and I moved up to New Hampshire, and there's a fair up there called the Hoppington Fair. Reminds me very much of Branchville because you still park in their lawns and they still charge it $5 and they still pay their taxes by that. But it's for us for the Sussex County New Jersey State Fair. If they had not moved, they would not have survived. It's just as simple as that. And
so another question. So the Lockwood connection, obviously that's Grandpa Horace's side of the family. Now, in the way the fair was incorporated, it was incorporated in 1941. Is that correct, Lois, or is it 1940?
Right around
One of those
yes,
years. I forget.
give or take a year.
Give or take, 1941, 1940. So on the original signers of the corporation, it's Adolphus Newman Lockwood and it's Clifford Warren Sandford. Do you know how Great-Grandpa A.N.'s contribution was to the fair, like to the incorporation of the fair?
Not probably. My grandmother, Lockwood, was instrumental along with the Condents and a few others getting the Newton Hospital started. So the Lockwood side was very active in the hospital. And the hospital connection with the fair was synonymous because that was one of the main charities that the fair gave to. So that's how A.N. got involved with the fair.
And that was before Grandma and Grandpa were married, right? They got married in 1941.
41.
So,
Give or take.
So it might have been incorporated
they all
in
knew each
1940.
other at the time.
Yeah,
but
it was.
But that's how the Lockwood side got involved in the fair, mainly through the Newton Hospital on that.
okay.
And
I was wondering how, because they're two founding members of, of the corporation of the fair. So I found it interesting that it's interesting because the Lockwood side, I mean, the Sandford side was very much involved with it, but it's interesting to see where the Lockwood connection
the Sandford
comes in.
side and the Tanis side and all were all the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
The Lockwood side was through the hospital, through the, civic side of it.
It's interesting.
But I think just the events as they changed. We miss people. I miss Jules Marin crowing like a rooster to start the fair.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Warren Welsh tried to imitate it, but never succeeded.
Wasn't as good a...
No.
And now it's Aldo Sayer does it, right? Aldo's still doing the...
Is it now? Aldo's wife and my mother were close, and I'm trying to think. Can you remember with Aldo's
Aldo
son?
was very good friends with, he always refers to Uncle Bill as Billy Sanford.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they
were very friendly.
He was very
Aldo
friendly,
and
and there were 3 horsemen, I think, right? Horse riders. There were 3, I think Ayers might have been the other one, and there's one other I can't remember right now. But the 4 of them went to World War II, and Aldo was the only one to come back from the war. But it's interesting. I mean, the World War II definitely had a huge impact, I think, on the community.
Oh, on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at any rate, I think
One of the memories that I have is we've talked a little bit about parking, and Grandpa had a very special parking spot. And I think he was either friends with the gentleman or whatever, but that was his spot, and I'm sure he paid for that spot, and it was near the front gate. And as you came in the front gate, then there were all the rides.
Yeah.
And I remember once asking Grandpa to come with me on the merry-go-round. And And no, that wasn't a good idea. But I think my two brothers got him on the Ferris wheel. That wasn't a good idea.
No, he kept yelling for it to stop, and Brian and I were having a great time. What do you want it to stop for? I'm getting sick. Oh, don't.
Yeah, you got almost like
Lean
you
over
got
here,
car
Grandpa.
sick. He was getting motion sickness.
We were
Were
having
you
a good
guys were you guys making the seat
I
like
don't know,
go
we were
back?
having- we were having a good
They were
time.
doing very nicely, but Grandpa just didn't.
Yeah,
that
and it was
didn't
moving.
Go well.
It was moving rapidly around.
Yep.
But you know, the fair offered a lot of things to us. At home we never had sausage and onions and peppers. You went to the fair and you got that, and I said, "Whoa, this is pretty good." Not that Mom ever gave it to us, but
Right. No, but you could have
I
it
couldn't
at the
wait till
fair.
the fair came back so I
Yeah.
could do it. So I just think that there are many memories.
I also got into the flower part of it with flower arranging.
Oh,
and
that
some
was
of
always nice
And that was
to
fun.
see
It was
the
in the
flowers.
school. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my brothers
school.
always got me on the tractors. And that was
Yeah.
always great fun. And seeing the gypsy moth, what would you call it? Exhibit.
Yeah.
They were big back in the 60s, and the
What,
50s.
big moths
and-
or-
No, they
was a
were,
big
it was a
issue.
big issue, and it now is an issue today. And I'm there like, I know exactly what gypsy moths look like. I've known them for a long time.
So that but I think the fair now offers the community a lot more diversity. It does offer the amusements, so you're able to handle that generation, the young. It offers the excitement of the mud bogging. It offers. I mean, I don't know if they still have the Budweiser team occasionally, but it offers a ring that can handle that size of things, and so I think it's just one good time after another,
Right.
and I think that
It's good it's still going.
yeah, for Brian and I think for Pam, the three of us, it was a bonding experience. It brought our family and other families together, and once a year, if you were far and wide, you would come that week, and I think people still do. It's just
Yeah. They mark that full week on their
Well, it was-
calendar, you know.
Yeah. As growing up as kids, it was a big event, the beginning of August. And there were all sorts of different activities that you were preparing for to go.
Now, did both of you, Uncle Rod and Dad, did you guys ride? You said you were 5 and 7 when you rode the first time. Did you ride a couple more years after that in the show?
we did,
or
but we never did much better.
there's pictures I think of you guys in a wagon. I think there's one where
This is the one that
that was the first one.
that
That's
was the
your
first
7
one
and
that
5
Oh.
in that one. And then
Yeah.
there's ones with the wagons in there. I think
Let's
Uncle
see.
Rod's with Gramp, WH
with
in the
Gramp,
one.
yeah.
And then I think your dad, you're in one with Grandpa Cliff.
Oh, and the two brothers are together.
Yeah, we were this one, and let's see.
We were just celebrities constantly, you know.
Yeah.
If I couldn't wear my big hat, it wasn't, you know.
That's Grandpa Cliff and you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's in your what was the name of that famous
This-
cowboy?
Hopalong Cassidy.
Hopalong.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Whoops.
And then Rod was talking about the
Yeah.
the aspect of the horses that got on
Oh,
like
yeah.
a barrel type of thing.
That's
These
Grandma.
are the ones.
And that's
Yeah.
Grandma Jane and Uncle Bill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the
Jane's
things
brother.
that is
And that was part of the
Yeah.
circus.
one of the things
That was
that's
Tony the
amazing
Pony.
with farmers, and people don't think of this so much because they're probably the busiest people around, but yet they have time for family. You've got 2 times a day if you're a dairy farmer, morning and night to milk, but in between that time, you can devote it to family or friends, and they would have sleigh ride picnics or sleigh rides in the wintertime, picnics in the summer, because they were able to get that time and budget for friends and family. So I think that was one of the advantage of a farming community.
Yeah.
was certainly that they had time for family.
That's right.
Well, that sums up, I think, the Lockwood Sandford side of our story of the fair. I want to thank my dad, Brian, my Aunt Pam, and my Uncle Rod for sharing their stories. It's very exciting to hear, all of your stories over the years with the fair and, what future generations will get to be a part of as it continues to hopefully continue as we move on.
If we can give anything back, it would. Had 85 years, maybe we're in big hopes that it can have another 285 years. It's something that becomes continuous, that you're able to pass down, we're all able to pass down the importance of what it is to the community.